Today, we are focusing on how families are responding mentally and emotionally to disaster and how children process loss when a parent or caregiver dies.
Welcome to the Carlat Psychiatry Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Fader, the editor-in-chief of the Carlat Child Psychiatry Report and co-author of the Child Medication Factbook for Psychiatric Practice, 2nd edition, 2023. And one of my side jobs, as Mara knows, is I'm co-chair of the Disaster and Trauma Issues Committee of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry.
And I'm Mara Goverman, a licensed clinical social worker in Southern California with a private practice and an avid reader of the Carlat Psychiatry Reports. Thanks so much for joining us. These topics come up often, unfortunately, especially after disasters that displace families and strain support systems. We see responses unfold in waves.
My byline is ready or not. These things are coming for all of us, and we all need to be ready. In the early days after, like a flooding that we've just had, we hear a lot about food, shelter, water, but mental and emotional responses are happening right away also.
For kids, that response may show through behavior more than words. They might act more dependent, withdraw, show irritability, or even have trouble sleeping.
So we've been displaced by fires a couple times here in Southern California. And I remember with my own family how disruptive that was. You get your go bag, you jump in the car, you don't know if your house is going to be there. The kids are unsure, right? And the animals are all at Twitter. In fact, even today, I was just telling Mara before we started today, I was out sheep herding with my sheepdog, and the sheep are very distressed. And I'm wondering, are they, expecting something like an earthquake or who knows? Actually, that was just a fire warning that came in on my phone as we spoke. I'm going to just check that. So I'm on my watch duty app for fires here, even though we're talking about floods today. And we've got a 0.5 acre fire a little bit far from us. And the winds are going, they're going in the other direction. So that's the good news. But even so, we're watching for these things all the time in Southern Cal for fires, and we hope everybody has good and better warning systems moving forward as well. So let's talk about how psychiatric teams can support families during and after things like the Texas floods, and we also had Carolinas had flooding too with some deaths. The first focus is stabilization, safety, sleep, and access to medications.
And also checking in on the caregivers. Parents often feel like they have to hold it together, but they're dealing with their own stress responses, including loss of housing, jobs, and routines.
Sometimes there's mobile clinics or telepsychiatry for areas where there is no possibility of in-person care. Even short check-ins with families can help them stay stable
and connected. Keep those sessions flexible, maybe 10 minutes at first. Focus on sleep, hydration, irritability, or reactivity. That tells us how a person's nervous system is holding up.
Right. And again, so as a disaster psychiatrist, one of my hats, how often do I actually run across the country to a disaster? Not very often for me. It's mostly within my own community where I end up doing some of these things. But what we do for our colleagues is we stay in touch. So at ACAP, we have kind of a phone tree, right? So we've got colleagues all over the country and actually globally all over the world. And every time there's a disaster, whether man-made, like a mass shooting or a new war, or there's a natural disaster, a flood, tornadoes, hurricanes, we reach out to those areas, to our mental health colleagues, to remind them of just these kinds of things we're talking about today, so they can remind their colleagues to be paying attention to these things. And then what we also do is we take time to spend with them, to listen to their stories, to let them decompress so that they can stay steady, so they can help their colleagues stay steady, so those colleagues can help families and parents stay steady, so they can help the children to get through this Okay. After a death, especially of a parent or caregiver, children may have deep emotional shifts, even if they don't express it outwardly.
We often tell caregivers there's no one right way to grieve. Each child brings their own understanding, their own questions, and they won't always come forward on their own.
One thing that's helped many families is simply naming that it's okay to talk, that you're available even if you don't have all the answers. That message alone can give a child permission to begin expressing what's going on inside to you or to somebody else. I mean, mental health clinicians are stretched thin, and a lot of times what we're doing is we're helping parents to be able to withstand hearing some of the things from their kids if we're not able to be there all the time for them.
Some kids won't say a word about it for weeks. Others ask the same question again and again. That's normal. It's how they're trying to understand something that changed their world forever.
And it's helpful to remember that children might carry fears they don't speak about, like whether the surviving caregiver will die too, or whether they'll forget the parent who passed, or whether they blame themselves for the death of that parent. Even though it's irrational, a lot of kids do that. We did an interview with Julian Ford a couple years ago for the Carlat Child Psychiatry Report, and he talked a lot about developmental trauma where you're in a disaster and that's bad enough, but then you lose a caregiver, someone who you really depend on to be able to stay steady. These kinds of losses are more than doubly worse than just being through the disaster itself.
As well as the unexpected nature of what has happened to them, which creates so much fear and anxiety. Remember, grief isn't only sadness. It can be fear, guilt, and even numbness. And it helps to let kids hold on to familiar things while also starting new routines that feel safe and stable.
If you're a caregiver, your presence matters more than any perfect conversation. Being consistent, showing warmth, letting them ask questions, that's really where the healing starts.
Let's talk about something we're seeing increasingly: children exposed to frightening news or events, floods, shootings, war, earthquakes, even just hearing about a classmate's loss. They absorb more than we think.
Even if they don't have the language for it, kids pick up on tension and fear and disruption. Helping them make sense of what they've seen or heard can reduce anxiety and confusion.
As a starting point, you might say something like, is there something you saw or heard that you want to talk about? It's a gentle way to open the door without pushing to get kids to talk.
Adults sometimes give too much information or too little. But kids don't need every detail. They need enough to understand the situation in a way that makes sense for their age.
An age-appropriate explanation. Keep it simple. And they need honesty. False reassurance, like saying everything's fine when it's not, can backfire. It can make kids worry even more, feel like they're on their own, or that you're not telling them the truth.
Right. It's also about how we say things. For example, instead of saying someone went away, we say they died. It's clearer. It avoids confusion.
And it's okay to visit these topics more than once. In fact, we encourage it. Kids process in stages and hear things in stages. One conversation probably won't be enough.
We also model. If we say, this makes me feel sad, but I talk to people when I feel this way, we're showing that emotions aren't problems to hide.
And for younger kids, physical comfort is powerful. Sometimes a hug says more than a sentence, especially in moments when the words feel too big.
For older kids and teens, it's also worth guiding them toward accurate sources of information. Misinformation online can make fears worse.
And don't hesitate to ask for help. These conversations are heavy, and you don't have to hold them alone.
As clinicians, we may focus on the family or the individual, but grief and trauma also ripple through communities. And this is where leadership, both formal and informal, shape how people begin to recover.
Leaders are often the ones who help people feel grounded again. That includes not just elected officials, but school principals, pastors, local business owners, and anyone people look to for guidance.
After a disaster or tragedy, people want someone who can name what happened and help them make sense of it, not with perfect answers, but with clarity, calm, and presence.
And a plan. And one message that helps is simply, we're in this together. That doesn't take away the grief, but can help people feel less alone inside it.
You know, as doctors, what we discourage people from doing is jumping into the fray and saying, I'm going to just go to a disaster scene and help. We don't want you to do that. But call the Red Cross. They'll figure out how to use you. Usually it's the Red Cross in the US. Sometimes it's other organizations in other countries. But we as clinicians are often leaders in our community, but we have to kind of know what we're doing.
And know where you are needed.
Right. And so one of our roles sometimes is to actually be behind the community leaders who we might know and helping them just stay calm and keep their messaging clear and helpful. In the early days after a traumatic loss, there are often waves of sadness, intrusive thoughts, or a lot of people withdraw. So leaders who show up visibly and emotionally actually help the community regulate. We're talking about emotional, but not overwhelmed emotional, right? So that's why we help them stay steady.
As we noted, grief can take different forms. For some, it's delayed. For others, it's quiet. And some people avoid anything that reminds them of the event.
And that's why communication matters. Keep it simple. Repeat key points. Acknowledge what's known and what's not known. And that builds trust and helps reduce confusion and rumor. Although we always have anger, we always have rumor. I mean, first people pull together typically, and then people get angry after a few days. And it's a really long process. Communities are impacted for years. In Texas, you know, it happened 10 years ago. And of course, everybody's pointing fingers now about, you know, what we should have done and why did we make or not make these decisions. You know what? Right now, it's time to save people and to try to help people recover. And I mean, I think everybody wants a better warning system, but let's try to do this together rather than ripping each other apart.
And it helps to use more than one communication channel, whether it's a press briefing or someone talking at the PTA meeting or grocery store.
Leaders can also support healing by organizing memorials, attending services, and again, just showing emotion publicly that humanizes the grief and gives others permission to do the same.
And in recovery, leaders shift toward the future, reopening schools, restoring rituals, setting goals. They don't have to fix everything, but they create the environment for people to re-engage and have a plan.
A community begins healing when it feels safe to move forward, and leadership plays a big role in setting that tone, especially when families are already navigating loss, trauma, and change at home. And we should just mention that there's cultural aspects here too, right? With the Hawaii fires a couple years ago, there was a lot of mistrust of the outside coming in. Like the Red Cross felt like, you know, an outside group that didn't really know the community trying to come in and help. And the recovery process is complicated by that, but it's always complicated. I was in conversations daily, then weekly with the psychiatry leadership out in Hawaii, and I'm still in touch with them periodically because it's a continuing process even a couple years later.
We've talked a lot about how to support children after personal loss or frightening events, but it's also true that caregivers are holding so much right now.
Over the past few years, we've seen pandemic stress, racial violence, discrimination, economic instability. These aren't just abstract issues. They show up in our homes and bodies, in both how we parent and how we cope.
That's why one of the most grounding things that we can say is you're allowed to feel hurt. You may not be showing up in the same way you used to. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human.
And for many caregivers, trauma isn't just current, it's layered with personal or historical pain. When a new event echoes a past one, it can feel like everything's happening at once. You know, we just saw that with October 7th, right? People felt like it was the Holocaust happening all over again for people who were survivors and then being victimized, traumatized, raped, just horrible. And that can happen even when it's not as direct, right? So think about Texas. I mean, it happened 10 years ago. Any trauma that was still there from before can get reawakened. So it's a real problem. And it's also intergenerational. These things do get passed down in stories, but also with the control systems for your genetics that make you at risk to be more hypervigilant and more likely to react.
One helpful framework is pause, reset, nourish, or PRN. Start with a pause. What am I feeling? Where is this showing up in my body? Then reset. What might help me to feel a little steadier? And then nourish. What helps me to feel connected again to myself, to my people, and to the moment that I'm in?
And identities matter. When parts of you are being targeted, that creates a different kind of exhaustion. It can make the world feel unsafe, even in quiet moments.
So connection is healing, whether that's family, faith, community groups, or identity-affirming spaces. Reach toward the people who help you feel seen and offer the same to others. A simple check-in can carry a lot of power.
And let's not forget, kids watch how we respond. When we model acknowledging emotion, asking for help, or creating routines, we're not just coping, we're teaching them how to cope too.
Parents can even talk about injustice in a way that builds strength. What's happening isn't okay, and here are some things that we can do. That could be joining a group, writing a letter, helping someone at school feel supported.
And don't forget, it's okay to limit media. You don't have to carry the world's pain 24/7 to care deeply. Stepping away can help you stay regulated enough to support the people around you. And what I tell some of my families is pilots can only fly for a certain amount of time. Policemen and fire department people, they only stay on duty a certain amount of time. And it's the same for you. You got to put yourself off duty and not watching that stuff all the time, or you won't be able to function. And for your kids, really limiting it is so important because they get just
Flooded.
overwhelmed. They get flooded. That's the word.
Lastly, ask for help. There are community resources, crisis lines, and trusted people in your circles. You don't need to wait until you feel broken. Support is part of resilience, not the opposite of it.
We've talked a lot about how kids respond to disasters and grief, how to support them emotionally, how communities recover, and how caregivers manage collective trauma.
The through line is simple. Connection heals. Whether it's in a one-on-one conversation, a shared meal, a team huddle, or a community vigil, being there makes a difference.
One note on that, we don't force people to talk. We found that actually increases rates of PTSD. We make the opportunities, but we don't force the ball there. So we want to open it up. We want to model it, but don't pressure people necessarily to do that. And be vigilant for people who might not be doing well so that you can focus and target them for additional help. Look, we've included resources in the show notes, from helping children to cope with grief, to supporting caregivers, to managing identity-based stress. We'll also put something in there about making your own go bag. Use them when you need them. Share them with someone else who might.
And if you're listening today feeling tired, stressed, or unsure, that's okay. Take a moment, take the breath. You are not alone.
Everything from Carlat Publishing is independently researched and produced. There is no funding from the pharmaceutical industry.
And yes, the newsletters and books that we produce depend entirely on reader support. There are no ads, and our authors do not receive industry funding. That helps us to bring you unbiased information that you can trust.
I hope this conversation helps our listeners make informed choices and do the things they need to do to care for themselves and their communities. If you found this discussion helpful, subscribe for more episodes on mental health and psychiatric care, and please share it with others who may need to hear this message. And remember, when we look for good things, more good can follow.